You are live.
Okay. We call to order the meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission for Tuesday, March 30, 2021. Prior to our roll call, the city attorney has a series of announcements to make. Ms. Poon?
Thank you, Chair Wallace. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this planning commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over the specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference. And this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
All right, we have Commissioner Alpert.
Here.
Commissioner Frank.
Here.
Commissioner Marks.
Here.
Vice Chair Kuznick.
Here.
And Chair Wallace.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, round two. Ms. Poon, the floor is yours.
Thank you again, Chair Wallace. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. Rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I'll ask all 3. And if the answer is yes to all 3, please say yes and physically raise your hand. Question number 1, can you hear me well? Question number 2, have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? And question 3, are you satisfied based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise that everyone here representing themselves to be a commission member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be? I'm looking for yeses and hands, please.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Seeing all hands raised, the record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each commission member present to all 3 questions. That all commission members have indicated they are able to hear each other and these proceedings clearly. And no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would now like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Poon. Item number 3 is public comment. Ms. Chavez, could you enlighten the public on the rules for public comment at this point?
Sure. During special meetings like this one, public comment is limited to the item described in the notice. If you wish to speak under public comment, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on item 4.1, Bishop Ranch 6 study session.
Do we have any written communications relating to item 4.1?
We do. We received one. It was in favor from Ralph Ballart. So he was in favor of Bishop Ranch 6 development.
Okay, thank you.
That was all we received.
Okay. Do we have any hands raised clamoring to talk?
Let me see here. I do not currently see any hands raised.
Okay, that being the case, going once, going twice, public comment is now closed. Item 4 is the study session, item 4.1 on the redevelopment of Bishop Ranch 6. We have a staff report by Ms. Yee. You're up.
Great, thank you. This evening, I'm here to just provide a brief staff report for the study session. Rather than doing a separate PowerPoint, the applicant has prepared a presentation that will walk you through the application. And I thought that would just be the best way to get us through really the project itself. And then we can come back to the questions that have been put into your packet on page 12 and 13. And we can use that as a guide for this evening's discussion. But with that being said, Jen, could you promote Denise?
Sure.
Kevin and Denise will be providing the presentation. I'll go ahead and share my screen, and Jerry and Robert, please. Thank you.
I see there might have been two Kevins. I promoted one. I hope I got the right one there.
You did, yes.
Okay, and who was the last person? You said there was one more, I think.
Robert and Jerry.
Robert, last name for Robert?
Robert
I have a
Freed.
Robert Freed.
Robert Freed.
Okay. And then I saw Jerry up here. Okay, we should be good to go.
Okay, let's wait till the screen warms up. Okay, so which of the applicants' representatives wants to lead off?
Oh, I will start. Good evening, Chair Wallace and Planning Commissioners. I'm Denise Cunningham, Vice President of Development with Summerhill Homes. And I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. I'd also like to thank staff for their efforts, their continued efforts to date. We also have Robert Freed, Summerhill CEO, and Kevin Ibrahimi with Summerhill Homes, the Senior Vice President of Development. And we're all available to answer any questions that you might have. Could you go to the next slide, please? So as we mentioned in our earlier meeting, Summerhill Homes is a local home builder. We're located right here in Bishop Branch 8, and we really strive to develop the most compatible housing type for every location. This is a great example of infill development, providing high quality homes near jobs and transit and within walking distance to retail and services. The property is located in a priority development area in the North Camino Ramon specific plan, and providing for sale housing in this area complements the recently approved City Walk Master Plan by providing high quality homes near jobs, transit, retail, and services. And it also provides a variety of housing to complement the City Walk Master Plan. And next slide, please. So the plan includes a total of 404 homes with 3 unique product types. We have single family court homes and row homes, and we also have attached townhomes. And this mix of housing types really maximizes the density at 18.5 dwelling units per acre, while still providing a diversity of housing. And this creates an opportunity for a wide range of buyers. A new 2-acre park is located at the corner of Executive Parkway and Camino Ramon. And with this location was selected in consultation with city staff and the parks director, and really provides access for the homeowners and the greater community. Guest parking is provided along all the internal streets, and that's depicted in purple on your screen. And it exceeds the city's guest parking requirements by about 70 spaces. EV chargers are also included in some of the guest parking spots. Next slide, please. So the perimeter, consistent with the North Camino Ramon specific plan and the City Walk Master Plan, emphasis was placed on the walkability and connectivity, and that's really a large part of the design that we've come up with. Connections are provided throughout the community and create a seamless transition to Bishop Branch and the future City Walk Master Plan. And what we have here are 2 enlargements of the frontage along Camino Ramon. The top exhibit is from the row homes along Camino Ramon, and it's closer to the park at Executive Parkway. And the lower exhibit is further north in front of the attached row homes. The entire Camino Ramon frontage is generously landscaped, and it has a good setback of between 35 and 40 feet, and includes an 8-foot wide meandering sidewalk that allows for a variety of landscaping and grouping of trees in this area. There's also multiple connection points, as you can see in these blue circles. This will bring you in from Camino Ramon right up to the Paseos, which provide greater access through the community and continue that connectivity. Next slide, please. The architecture. This is an artist rendering of the court homes with these 3 distinct product types. It provides different buyer preferences, and they're generally grouped in smaller neighborhoods. And the plans include a variety of options to tailor to each buyer's preference. We have sustainability features. We have 220 outlets in the garages. This can accommodate a car charger or an EV charger if someone wants to install that in the future. We have tankless water heaters, solar, smart thermostats, drought tolerant landscaping, and also the transportation hub is conveniently located across Camino Ramon. So again, this is an artist rendering of the court homes, and you can see these extend from Executive Parkway all the way to Norris Canyon along the westerly edge of the property. Next slide, please. These are 2- and 3-story single-family homes. We have 4 plan types with multiple elevations. They're 3 and 4 bedrooms ranging from approximately 2,100 to 3,000 square feet. And this is an enlarged layout to illustrate how the homes are oriented around a shared motor court. All of the homes have 2-car garages. We have one plan that has an option of a 3rd-car tandem garage. The 2 plans along A Street, Plan 3 and Plan 1, have their front doors facing the street to help activate the street. The other homes access the front doors through the court. Each home has a private yard and generous decks, and rooftop decks are included on plans 3 and 4. And this provides additional private open space and articulation of the architecture. Next slide, please. This is the single family row homes, and they're located, you can see the key map at the bottom. These are located along Camino Ramon, adjacent to the park. And this view is from Executive Parkway, from the park looking towards the homes. The row homes also face the entire edge of the park, activating this public space. And these are detached homes with 3 different floor plans and multiple elevations. They're 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom and range from 1,900 to 2,400 square feet. Next slide, please. And this is an enlarged layout for your reference, and also shows the entries off of the paseos. So this is Camino Ramon. We have the entry to the paseos. All of the front doors are accessed off of the paseos, again, helping create this connectivity throughout the entire site. Most of the homes have private yards as depicted in green on your exhibit, and they have private decks. All of these homes also have 2-car garages. Next slide. So this is the towns. The towns are traditional attached townhomes, and these are grouped together at the northern edge of the property at the corner of Norris Canyon and Camino Ramon. And we have a variety of building sizes. We have 5, 6, and 7 unit buildings. And this provides a diversity of the buildings and minimizes the massing. We have 4 different floor plans, 3 and 4 bedrooms, ranging from 700 to 2,200 square feet. All of these homes also have private decks. And consistent with the city's new inclusionary housing ordinance, 15% of the attached townhomes will be available to very low, and moderate buyers. Next slide. So this is a view also of the plan layout from Camino Ramon for the townhomes. Again, connectivity from Camino Ramon through these shared paseos. And this is landscape paseos, and all of these homes have 2-car garages. Next slide. And this is the jewel of the community park, a new 2-acre community park located at the corner of Executive Parkway and Norris Canyon. And the location really welcomes the greater community and the existing neighbors. Next slide. So this plan illustrates the uses that have been suggested by the city We've included pickleball courts, children's play areas, a large lawn for informal sports activities. And we've got gathering nodes throughout and features to activate the connectivity throughout the site. And we do anticipate going back to the Park Commission and working with the city on the final layout. Similar to what was approved recently at City Walk, we anticipate this will be a privately owned, publicly open park, and this will be maintained by the HOA. So this relieves the city of the ongoing maintenance costs and responsibilities. Next slide. This is an imagery board that shows concepts of the active uses at the top of the screen, and at the bottom, some of the more passive uses along the edges and the perimeter, the buffer area. And just to recap, the proposal implements the North Camino Ramon specific plan, and it provides high quality for sale housing where it's most needed, delivering a new 2-acre turnkey park and expanding connectivity with enhanced pedestrian and bicycle connections. And this wraps up Summerhill's vision, and we look forward to receiving your feedback and answering any questions.
Hey, do we have any other speakers? Either Mr. Freed or Mr. Engen want to talk?
I will be here to answer questions and appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Engen, you want to say a word or two?
Well, I'm not here to make a presentation tonight, but I'm here to answer questions as needed.
Okay. All right. So at this point, it's question and answer time. First of all, the commissioners, do they have any questions for staff or the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Commissioner Marks, you're up.
Just a couple of quick questions. With regard to park fees that the city typically charges, I think your offer to provide the park available to the public maintained by the homeowners association is very generous. In fact, I haven't really ever seen that before. Typically, homeowners associations take care of their own, but they don't want the general public coming into the facility. What I'd like to know, though, is relative to the park fee, is there going to be a request to divert some or all of the required park fees back to this project, or is the fee in addition to the offer relative to the park?
We would be asking for credit of a 2-acre park and the improvements and paying the balance of the fee to the city.
Okay. My next question has to do with perimeter landscaping. This is just a question. You would think that given all the time we spent on the City Walk project, I would remember the landscaping at the edges, but I don't. And so I'm asking, how well does the edge treatment along Camino Ramon and Executive Parkway dovetail with the city park, or I'm sorry, the City Walk plan along those streets?
Well, we've worked with both Sunset and the city to come up with a plan that complements that and extends the walkways along Camino Ramon.
Can you clarify that a little bit more?
I can add a little bit more
Yeah.
color to that too. So
Thank you, Jerry.
we're still working closely with them. We are actually working with our landscape design consultant who did the design guidelines for City Walk to pick the final trees that will become the street tree throughout all of City Walk, including the frontage along here. So we haven't quite selected tree. We're in the process of doing that and working on some nuances of their layout to work with Summerhill to get the best layout possible and be cohesive with City Walk, all within the design guideline criteria. So we are working hand in hand to finalize that, which we'll be doing here in the next, week or a couple of months, whatever it takes to get through that process. And then obviously, as they come back before you, you'll start to see those final details come together.
Okay, good answer. Thank you. Last question. I didn't quite catch the comment in full regarding electric vehicle charging stations. So my question is, in all of the 404 units as proposed, will there be wiring for electric vehicle charging should a property owner wish to install that equipment?
Yes, we include a 220 outlet, which is what's required to charge your car if you want to plug it into the wall. And it also makes it more easily adaptable if a homeowner wants to put in a full charging station.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just follow up on
Sure.
Commissioner Marks's question? As
Sure.
it relates to the landscape design, was that including both executive as well as Camino Ramon where it borders on? Great, thank you. And then the second question, similar, the walking district. The walking district was something we discussed extensively as part of the City Walk project. And the walking district flows over into this project. It was mentioned in the application. Could you talk a little bit about how that's going to be included and how Summerhill Homes is participating in the walking district effort that's just now kicking off in the city?
Sure, we've had an initial conference call with the planners for the walking district and the city, along with Sunset, and we'll continue to work with them as that evolves. And I think they're aware of these improvements as well.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Albert? Okay. Commissioner Kuznick.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions, and I'll just hit you as I jotted them. On the, to what degree are the homes going to have solar panels? I know some have rooftop gardens, but is there I didn't see that featured or mentioned. Is that something that is included?
They will have solar panels, and we'll be working as we get through the design of the architecture with the solar consultant on the arrays of where they can fit on the roofs.
Okay, great. So next question. I saw that in the project that demolition was kind of pinned at 2023. But my question is, do you anticipate the build out to be a phased build out, or you're going to put all 400 up at once? And which part of the schedule does the park get done?
It will be a phased build out. We wouldn't build 400 homes necessarily all at once.
Okay.
So there will be some sort of phasing. The park will need to give that some consideration. We can certainly do that and get back to you on the scheduling.
Okay, fair enough. And my last two questions really tie in with the City Walk and some concerns that I have, as usual, about children bicycling, getting to and from school, and so forth. So if I recall, the City Walk is planning a relocation of a transit center on Executive Parkway. Is that correct? You can just nod, Jerry, if that's
It's not
correct.
a relocation. We're actually
You're building a new one.
Yeah, the existing center stays where it is. We're adding 3 new ones.
That is correct, but
And one is directly across the street, across Executive Parkway from them, just directly south and a little bit west.
That's what I thought, and that's a really good feature. I'm happy about that. But I will say that in looking at the plans and where the driveways are, that I'm kind of concerned if this is a family-centered neighborhood. If you're a kid who's got to get themselves to school, the access points aren't necessarily aligned with where there might be a signal light. So this might be not just for Summerhill, but also for city staff. What we have to look at how crosswalks are, particularly in the middle of the development that will cross Camino Ramon to hit the access point to the Iron Horse. And likewise, if you're going to the elementary schools going up over Norris Canyon, then you would have to cross Norris Canyon to take a left to go towards Bollinger can't anyways. So I have some concerns on that. That's not necessarily your responsibility, but
Mhm.
I want to make sure that it becomes part
That's
of.
a good comment. Thank you. We'll think about that. And
Okay, and then I have just one more kind of like, well, I probably have more, but this is the one I have right at this moment. I know that we were really excited with City Walk and having that walking from city center straight up all the way to the end. And I just wondered if there was any thought about how to kind of, tweak the layout so their walkway actually aligns with your roadway. Because it appears on the drawings we have that it's offset a little bit. And I know that seems like a small thing, but
no, we'll take a look at that.
okay. Thanks. Because that will help, create that enticement to walk all the way down to City Center if it's visually easy. So thank you. That Chair Wallace, that's what I have at this moment.
Thank you, Commissioner Kuzic. Commissioner Frank, do you want to have some questions?
The only questions I have, and I'm not sure I should be doing it in this piece or a different piece, but it was more for staff regarding the inclusionary housing ordinance issues that we were asked to opine on tonight.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was appointed right, I think literally like the week after this was the new citywide IHO was approved. And so I wasn't fully tuned into it. I was surprised to see that it apparently did not unify all the specific plan areas in the city. And so I guess we're being asked if it's appropriate to change to, I guess, really unify the NCRSP Vision Policy 3.5 with the IHO that was approved last year in April. And so I guess my first question is, apparently this is just confirming that ordinance that the city council adopted did not automatically do what we're being asked to do today, I guess. Maybe that's for you, Alicia, I don't know.
I think the answer is yes, it did not.
It would appear that way. I just was surprised. So
there has been some confusion. It is supposed to be, as you know, ordinances are supposed to be generally applied citywide, but because of the seven specific plans, they had their own. There had been some confusion as to that. So I think they just want, what the staff's looking for is to have some consistency with the ordinance now that's the standard.
Okay, so as I understand it, the existing policy in the North Camino Ramon specific plan is, I guess the way to put it would be more demanding of a developer than the citywide IHO, because it's I guess 25% affordable housing requirement as opposed to 15, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, through the chair, I can try to provide some of that background and answer your question. So I think the staff report gives a lot of the background as to when the North Camino Ramon specific plan was written. There was a number of different housing policies that the city was working with from the state level that restricted the ability for cities to require certain types of inclusionary provisions in our ordinance. And at the time, because the city was still working on our inclusionary housing ordinance, we had adopted basically what the general plan policy had in the general plan document at the time. And so the 25% has been something historically that the city has had because in other specific plans, we've over the years have also had a 25% inclusionary, but for projects on a much larger scale, like the Doherty Valley, where they did have a 25%. And so historically, the general plan had basically just taken that same original inclusionary requirement and we plugged it into all of our policy documents that were being written and adopted at the time. Up until about 2017, when a lot of the state law changed and there was a new shift in what could be done from the state level for multifamily housing and the requirements for inclusionary. The city then moved forward with formally adopting our inclusionary ordinance. And through 2017 to 2019, multiple meetings with Housing Advisory Committee, Planning Commission, and City Council determined that, based on fee studies that were done, impact analysis, review of other inclusionary ordinances in the Tri-Valley and the Bay Area, and really what was going to be a practical inclusionary requirement would be this 15%. And they took a different approach for the different types of housing. So single family versus multifamily, for sale versus rental, and really took a comprehensive approach to identifying what was the best solution for each product type and each housing type. So we're looking to align based on all of the work that was done in studying what would work best for the city, rather than just applying it to non-specific plan areas. We're slowly incorporating those in as we're updating specific plans to make sure all of those inclusionary policies are the same.
Got it. Thanks, Cindy. That was a great response. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Frank, any more questions?
I have nothing further right now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right. I actually did have a couple of questions. I'm going to start off with the applicant. On the affordable housing aspect, I sat through the Housing Advisory Committee meetings, and I'm aware of why they have different rules for rental property versus for sale. And I wanted to ask you about the proposal you have to do very low income housing for the I think the multifamily attached homes. From what I have been able to ascertain, the average family of four on a very low income in Contra Costa County makes about $65,000. When I ran my back of the envelope calculations, that might qualify them for a $300,000 loan, the current rates, or actually I did it before the rates went up. It appears to me from looking at comparable homes in San Ramon that sort of the bottom of the townhomes that you're proposing to sell probably will start around $1 million in current dollars. So your subsidy for a very low income family is about $700,000. And I wanted to make sure that my numbers were correct and that that's something that you understand. That's what the numbers work out to, and you're willing to do that.
Yes, we understand the requirements of the affordable, the inclusionary housing ordinance.
Okay.
And that is the breakdown currently.
Okay, and the numbers I gave you are at least within a realm of reason from what you looked at?
I would concur with that.
All right, okay.
I might add that I appreciate your pricing on the townhomes. It might be a little aggressive versus our point of view. I think the smaller townhomes, I would anticipate today's market would be in the low to mid $700,000. So while it's still a significant subsidy, it may not be quite as significant as you're referencing in your example.
Okay, and I was working off of figures that I pulled out of San Ramon recently, and I didn't even take into account the spike we've had here in the last couple of months, but it's still going to be substantial.
Yes, it's still substantial, but one of the strategies behind the master plan we're proposing and the three product types is to have a range of housing and a range of prices to have a very diverse community. And that helps us both from an absorption and financial performance, but it also creates a more vibrant community. So, that's embedded in our strategy.
No, I think I understand that. The concept is you don't make the entire project low-income housing unit, disperse it around so there's a variety of socioeconomic groups. I had a question for staff, and this did not come up in our staff report, but I actually did talk to you about it earlier today. As a practical matter, BR6 was built in the mid-'80s from what the staff report says. So the buildings there are about 35 years old, which also means that probably the tax base for that property in terms of property tax has been pretty flat since the mid-1980s. My back of the envelope calculations again are that the homes that are proposed to be built would have a market value of somewhere between $400 and $500 million. My question to staff, and I did talk to them about this earlier today, was I presume there will be a substantial increase in the assessed value of BR6, which will be a substantial increase in property tax assessment. And my question is, can you give us at least the general outlines of what San Ramon might expect to receive in that area? And let's assume hypothetically that the increase in fair market assessed value is, say, $100 million. Can you sort of give us a rough estimate of what the income to the city might be, considering that we are providing services to the area, both in police, fire, and otherwise?
I cannot give you a specific number. If I'm correct, Cindy, and nod, that part of the contract for the consultant team is to do basically that financial analysis to determine what the revenue to the city would be. And then there's a deficit, the requirement to form an assessment district or CFD, community facilities district, as we've done with all of our other projects. I will acknowledge, though, that the project is within the Bishop Branch Tax Exchange Agreement area. So the calculation is different than as the countywide tax property tax agreement. So it is a different calculation. As you may know, the city is working with the county to modify that agreement. And so those negotiations are still going on. But needless to say, there would be an increase in revenue to the city, as there would be with the change of the property to a higher value and the sale that has not occurred in many, many years. But to give you a specific number right now, I cannot do that. We will be working through that as part of this exercise in the project.
Okay. Now, the application requires a rezoning of BR6, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, and as such, SB 330 would not apply?
That's correct. So,
Correct.
yeah.
And neither would the state density bonus law, would it?
The project could, if they wanted to, apply for a density bonus. They haven't indicated that they would do so for this project.
Mhm.
And they're actually adjusting the range of the density lower than what the current specific plan allows. So they haven't discussed needing a density bonus for this project, but regardless of SB 330, they have that ability to do so if they chose to increase their inclusionary, proposal for the site. But because of the legislative change to the specific plan, in this circumstance, SB 330 does not apply.
So we're not looking at the 3 hearings and done rule.
Correct.
The five meetings. And,
Yeah, well, it's 3 for us, and you save 1 for the city council, and then you have 1 in reserve in case something blows up in your face. Okay, all right.
We wouldn't find any objections to less than 5 hearings, so
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. All right. Do any of the other commissioners have any follow-up questions? Commissioner Kuznick.
So I know it's part of the questions that you posed to us, but how do you anticipate in the North Camino Ramon project or a specific plan, the strip that was going to be the commons, which was to be housing in a walkability district? I mean, do we anticipate that kind of still being part of North Camino Ramon specific plan as this builds out, or?
A question, who is your question addressed to?
I suppose it goes to the staff, I would think. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't hold Summerhill to that responsibility.
I'll defer to Lauren. He knows the plan the
Okay.
best.
Okay, so at this point in time, the specific plan amendments and modifications are related to the Bishop Ranch mixed-use area.
Great.
So the balance of the plan remains intact, including the unit cap for new units. These units would count toward that, as that was what was analyzed under the EIR for the specific plan. But there would also be some modifications to the circulation system as it relates to this lower portion of the plan, and that would need to be analyzed again, given the assumptions in the EIR for traffic patterns and everything else. But as it stands, the vision for the portion north of Norris Canyon Road remains intact and still faces some of the challenges regarding fragmented ownership and the like.
Okay.
It will still stay intact for the area that is west of BR6, which is Toyota.
Correct. West and north.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions, Commissioner Alpert?
Cindy opened up the question about that Summerhill could certainly, propose a density bonus to, under this project. Is that something that you've considered in any shape or form, as you've been looking at this project? That's part of the question. And then maybe I'll stop there and let you answer that question.
We went through numerous site plans and market analysis and came up with the plan that we're proposing based on what we believe not only yielded, frankly, the highest land value to Sunset, but the highest return to us. And that return is based both on revenue and absorptions. And again, as I mentioned earlier, having multiple product types allows us to absorb the property at a faster pace versus if you have, one product type. So in that process, we did look at various levels of density and concluded that the proposal before you was best suited for our strategies.
Okay, and I'm not familiar with the term absorption. Could you maybe give a little?
That would be the rate at which we would be selling and then ultimately closing homes.
Okay, thank you.
So we have when we close on the property, there's a large payment, then you do your infrastructure development and you build up a fairly significant capital investment. And part of the way we return those dollars to us and get the highest rate of return is to have the sales and closings occur more rapidly by having 3 product lines than it would if you were only selling 1 product line. You'd have a smaller customer base, less sales, less closings.
Okay, and I probably know the answer to this question based on what you just said, Mr. Freed, but did you consider not having 3,000 square foot homes, but more 2,500 or more 2,000, getting perhaps more units on the property, for example?
We did look at that, and we looked at a land residual for each of the 3 product types. And again, and we also tried to do 2 things. One, not get too small to where there isn't a market for that. But as you also may allude to, there is a square footage cap, and you go too large and you can find yourself not properly positioned in the market. So we went through our analysis, and in addition to that, we reached out to 2 consulting firms to get their opinion on where they thought we should position this product as well, because I try not to get too stuck on my own ideas. And they confirmed the kind of square footage ranges that we're proposing as well.
Okay, great. And then just another question. I assume that at some point, we already talked about the inclusionary housing ordinance, and there's the build a certain percentage of the 15%, and then there's alternate ways to meet for the other 2 product types. And in the staff report, it talked about the in lieu fee, and I think that's one option for meeting the inclusionary housing ordinance. Maybe this is a question for Cindy and Lauren and Debbie. So that's a proposal that would be submitted. I believe it gets presented to staff and then it gets approved by the planning commission. I don't think we've ever seen a for sale project since we've had the inclusionary housing ordinance. Is that correct? It eventually will come before us to be approved or recommended to the council. Is that how the process works?
All right, I can answer that one. So this is really the first development project that has had an inclusionary housing ordinance requirement that would follow the requirements of the ordinance that was adopted in 2019. So this is actually the first project that's we're using the new policy requirements. The policy requires that an affordable housing plan be prepared by the applicant. And so through the completeness of the review of the project, that will be included as part of their application. And that would be provided as part of the development review that the Planning Commission would see. And that would identify essentially what the staff report has already discussed as far as the expected 15% must build and the affordability type and the expectations of what that the fee amount are. But that is packaged into a write-up by the applicant that would then be included with the review that the Planning Commission does on the application.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Cindy.
Any other questions, Commissioner Alpert?
No.
Commissioner Frank? Want to have another go to Commissioner Marks? Okay. All right. So we have exhausted our questions of staff and the applicant. So it's now turn for the commissioners to weigh in on their thoughts. Who wants to go first? If I don't see a hand raised, I get to pick on them. Okay, I'm going to start. Okay, Commissioner Marks.
I want to turn our attention to the traffic analysis that will be conducted for this project. I think I read that the staff has already retained consultants for the work, and that's fine. But it's my expectation that, in fact, we're going to see a decrease in traffic relative to a fully occupied 564,000 square foot office building compared to this proposal. What I would like is that the traffic analysis compare, perhaps using the ITE manual, what the traffic would be in three conditions with a 564,000 square foot office building fully occupied and the project. I would like it to take a look at the daily vehicle trips. I would like it to take a look at the level of service impacts in both the AM and PM peak hours at the critical intersections that are going to be studied. And based on the type of residential units that we are talking about. And then I would like to see that a very simple table be included as a part of the traffic analysis that compares the 564,000 square foot office building and those conditions against the 404 unit project before us based on the product types. Again, I suspect we're going to see that there's no net increase. In fact, I'm expecting there's a decrease, but I would like to be able to demonstrate that, not only for my own benefit of being more certain about it, but to the general public that not every land development that we are doing is overloading the streets. In a different sort of way, this is going to reduce traffic at critical times during the day. Let me start off though and say I'm very supportive of this plan. I like very much that you are aiming at middle housing. I like very much the product types that you are putting forward. I like the scale of those houses. I think that while they're not absolutely affordable, they're reasonably more affordable to families that I am concerned about. And so I laud very much what you are trying to do here. Most of my comments really have to do with site planning. Usually I have comments about architecture, but that's typically because when architecture is near some other neighborhood, I believe there needs to be a more contextual approach to the architecture. But in this case, there is no neighborhood. This is the neighborhood. And people purchasing the homes know what they're buying. And if they like it, they'll buy it. And if they don't, they won't buy it. So I don't have any comments about architecture. But the site plan is really something that I do have some questions about. They may not rise to the level of absolute concerns, but it's pretty tightly packed. This site plan does not have a lot of open area, and whatever it has is all in the 2-acre park at Executive Parkway and Camino Ramon. And if you live over on the Executive Parkway side of the project, as opposed to, I'm sorry, the Norris Canyon side, it's pretty tight. It's not uncommon to have a tot lot or some other open passive area for neighbors in that area to have a place to get together. When you scale off the distance from, say, the furthest end of the project to the park at Executive Parkway, you're talking about something on the order, I believe, of 6 to 7 football fields. That's not the kind of area that a lot of parents are going to say to their children, especially the townhouse parents who don't have a backyard. Why don't you go out to the park and play? There's no eyes on the play area. There's not a sense of they're nearby. And so I wonder what the thinking was in putting so many units into that area without any kind of open area for kids to play, neighbors to get together, etc.
I can make a first pass at that, and then if I make a mistake in recalling how we got there, Denise or Kevin can correct me. One of our original thoughts was to have a series of smaller parks spread throughout the community for the specific reasons you just mentioned. That became a bit problematic as we began to interface with staff and and this is not a criticism, but their direction to have a more substantial park located in one area that would not only serve our community, but would serve the public. And then it became a balancing act between, frankly, good design, economics, and trying to make sure we delivered a substantial 2-acre park. Our attempt to address your issue is really in some of the landscaped areas on the perimeter, as well as the mews that we have where you take access to the units. They're landscape walkways, albeit they're modest, but they do present a little gathering areas. Nevertheless, we can take another look to see if we can squeeze in some spots. But you are correct. It is a tight plan where we're trying to balance both density and delivering that substantial 2-acre park, as I mentioned earlier.
Well, I do understand the economics. I do also think, though, that the trend in city planning in the last number of years has been livable, walkable communities. And it just seems to me that it's overly tight where the townhouses are, again, on the far side. And I would like to see, I'm not trying to get rid of units. I do not believe that my concerns are based on 404 units and I'm going to try and get you down to 380 or something. I just think that there needs to be some better open space opportunities for that part of the overall project.
That is a fair challenge to us, and we'll take it on and see what kind of ideas we can come up with.
Okay. I would like to ask that at the next meeting or as soon as possible, and I think Commissioner Alpert mentioned the walking district. I don't know how this project really relates to the overall new walking district plans that are out there. And I would like to see a graphic, a plan that shows me at some scale how your project, how the park relate to the open space or to the walking district. I think the city is right on in its efforts to try and create the walking district, especially in an area where we're going to have some fairly high density residential. But it's not clear to me how the two relate. I do like the park as far as I understand it. But I want to get a sense of the walking district, the park, and the amenities that will be in the two of them. Let me say, relative to the answer that I got from I think Miss Cunningham, I wasn't. The staff report didn't mention that you were going to be looking for credit against park fees relative to the park you're going to build. Are you anticipating a development agreement?
I don't believe that we would have a development agreement, but we would instead follow the protocol that's already outlined in the park ordinance. So there perhaps could be, I don't know, Cindy, if they typically do park agreements.
Okay, well, I don't want to get into the real details. Here's the concern I have beyond the fees themselves. As I said, it's at least in my experience in a number of cities that homeowners associations are generally not well funded. They're required by state law to have various improvements fully funded, and I'd like to see an association that actually has that. And that's when they're just allowing their own membership to use the facility. In your case, you're contemplating the general public coming into the facility, and the public isn't always easy on a park. There are repairs that will be required. There is just general maintenance. And I can envision, and I have seen this in a community pool that was shared by 3 homeowners associations, where the president of that association and the board members see somebody who is not a member of the association, doesn't live in the project, using the facility and wants to challenge them. Why are you in our facility? We're paying for this. How are they going to react to being challenged? It seems to me there needs to be some kind of a document that establishes the rights of the general public to be in that park, and that there should be signage in the park that not only allows but anticipates and states the general public is invited to use this park. Otherwise, you have people paying for the damage or the general wear and tear, other people not paying anything and contributing, and some hard feelings. And so I don't know how we would do that outside of a development agreement. That's up to the staff to figure out, but it seems to me that's something we should anticipate. And then lastly, I guess, and I don't want to relive history, but question 3 on packet page 12 is the location and planned use of the 2-acre park appropriate? I, for one, would not be prepared to answer that tonight because I'd like to know a lot more about the park. I'd like to know what you're asking for from the city. I'd like to know how well I believe that is anticipated by the city's own parks master plan. And in general, when the park is going to come online. I don't want to make a commitment to a park, however well designed, and I think it is nicely designed, when I don't have a sense of when it's going to be online for the general public to use, if we're going to use general public funds through park fees to help pay for it. And so that's something I would ask other commissioners to consider deferring this question until we know more about the park. But again, those are not, in my opinion, showstopper questions. They are just simply my sense of this development, which again, I want to congratulate you. I think this is a very good project. I think it's overall pretty well thought out. There are some things I'd like to see that are improvements in my mind. But Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. Okay, who wants to go next? I think Commissioner Kuznick is ready to go.
Thank you very much. So I am also in favor of the proposal. I think Commissioner Marks mentioned some, reasonable topics related to the park and the townhomes. But I do have, I just wonder, one of the things that I failed to ask when it was asking is to what extent might your townhomes, or actually all of the homes, be equipped for an elevator, so that if you had folks who have mobility issues, that they could in fact be welcome in your community and so forth. I didn't see that in any of the plans that we got, but I'm hoping that that is something that you have, thought about and that somebody can put in as an option if they wish to include an elevator. I know there are disabled models in the plan because I saw those. And I would agree in terms of the townhomes being so far from the park, and those generally will probably be, more family oriented. I'm always cognizant, of small children needing a place to play, being close to a very busy street, Norris Canyon. So I agree, if there was something that could be more internal in attraction for kids to play, that I would hope that you would see that as a benefit as well. I do think it's a good use, changing it from Bishop Branch mixed use to mixed density. I think it will be a place that, we are looking to meet our RENA numbers. The staff didn't mention how this might play into those numbers. I'm sure they have that calculated out, but I suspect it might be for, numbers that were previously assigned, maybe not the new ones coming up, but, we're always cognizant of trying to squeeze in appropriate housing and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the other questions, I don't have, I support the project. I think it's in good stead. I just want to, think about safety, crossing two major streets, and for bicycles and children, or even slow-moving senior citizens crossing the street. If we're really trying to make it walking friendly, I shouldn't be so limited on my assessment of people's mobility. So thank you.
Thank you. Either Commissioner Alpert or Commissioner Frank want to weigh in now? How about you, Commissioner Alpert? You look like you're ready to go.
So I'll just offer comments. I'm not sure if we're going to go back and try and make sure we hit all of staff's questions. So Commissioner Marks already captured my biggest concern, and that's the site plan, but just I'll add not my version of the wording. Just obviously having more green inside the project would be a huge benefit. As I was looking at the drawings that you had along Camino Ramon, I would have thought, and I know it's really dense inside, just a way to get from the north side to the south side on a walkway that looked a little bit like what you're planning for Camino Ramon, I think would go a long way to making it feel less dense and less packed. But I'd hate to sacrifice, space inside for a bit of a green space on the far north side, the way Commissioner Marks said. So his idea was way better than I started with, but it just felt very concrete and crowded when I was trying to visualize what it looked like. So I welcome the next version that you mentioned, Mr. Freed. If you could come up with a way to, keep the units where they are and add some more green to the north side of the project, I think that'd be a great add. I also like the for sale concept. I would be a fan of more units, but a few smaller ones, because I think there's plenty of 3,000, $2 million units in San Ramon, and I think we need more, 2 million, $1.5 million units. But I appreciate, I appreciate the economics in your analysis that led you to this mix of housing types. So I'm not worried about the 404. I also was thinking about the public streets and the public park and an HOA, and being a little bit familiar with HOAs and how expensive it is to keep these things alive, and was just trying to think through, and I have no idea what it takes to maintain all of these private roads and then in a 2-acre park. And I was thinking, and I'm sure you've done all the math, and you know how much those 404 homeowners are going to have to pay per month to keep the park alive and the roads to city standards. And I would hate to see a fence come up around the park and saying for residents use only. So I'm glad that Commissioner Marks brought up the concern about making sure the park stays open, because I do think it's a great place and a great jewel to have that available. One of the staff questions was, does this complement City Walk and the business park? And I was also, and I mentioned this today when I met with staff, I was having a hard time visualizing how it connects to the City Walk project at the north side of the City Walk project, across Executive Parkway, how it connects to the walking district and across the street to the transportation center and the Iron Horse Trail. So, when we see it next time, having some ability to better visualize how this fits in with the way it's going to look when you walk across the street to the northwest and I guess it's the northwest corner of the City Walk project, just having a better appreciation for how those are all going to connect. And I think Commissioner Kuznick asked for, how can we visualize the road crossing across the street and walking straight down to City Center? I know we spent a lot of time learning about the roads through, I guess it's the east wing of 2600 and how it all connects to City Center. So I think that would be really helpful, I think, for us to all appreciate all the thought that you put into the site layout. And then I think I agree with what Commissioner Mark said. The park is in the right location, but how it fits into the parks master plan and I know that it'll go through the Parks Commission for programming and actual placement and what goes there. So I think that'll be very helpful so that they can weigh in on that. I think that's my overarching comments. And Chair Wallace, I assume we're going to spend a few minutes making sure we answered all of the staff report questions before we get to go home for tonight. So I'll stop there.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Frank.
So I don't really have anything earth-shattering to add regarding, first of all, overall, I think the upside by far outweighs the little downside in this project. I'm supportive of it also. I think there's a lot of good things in it that we need. It's housing in our core area. It's well thought out. And it's sort of where we need to be in meeting our housing numbers, or trying to meet our housing numbers. The 6 questions that we have, I would essentially respond in the affirmative. The one comment that I'll make is regarding number 3, and I appreciate my fellow commissioners sort of putting their finger on the density issue on the north side. I didn't really know how to articulate it until I heard you all saying it. And I agree there is an issue there. I think I heard Mr. Freed say that they'll take a look at that challenge and see what you can do. That would be great. I would say that, and this keeps coming up, I know this isn't really the applicant's problem as much as maybe a citywide issue, but our general plan 2035 does say that we're supposed to aspire to 6.5 acres of park for every 1,000 residents. This project at full build out is going to be north of 1,000 people, I believe, if I'm doing the calculations correctly. And yet it adds 2 acres. And again, we can't and we shouldn't impose that on each project, but this is yet another project where we are going to increase our deficit and making that number up. And so I raise that more as an issue for my fellow commissioners to contemplate when this comes back. And also I would throw it out to the applicant as a solicitation for partnership in helping us increase that number, especially if it can be worked into, even in a small respect, into the more dense north side of where the townhomes are in this project. So it seems like we could check a couple boxes there. That's really my only criticism of the project, and it's not really the project per se, which I think is well thought out. It's more of an issue that we have to deal with in our increasing deficit in reaching that target. And I understand that this target is going to be reworked in the next general plan, but that's what we're dealing with now as the policy. So that is really about all I could add at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank. What I'm going to do for my part is I'm going to walk through the questions so they'll be a little bit more organized, but it'll deal with some of the issues that you've all raised. The first question is the proposed land use. Is it appropriate? Having been on the committee when we drafted the North Camino Ramon specific plan, the heart of the plan was to have mixed use. And to a certain extent, this is a derogation of that. However, we all sat through meeting after meeting on the San Ramon Village Plan, where we were told that brick and mortar retail in San Ramon doesn't have much growth potential, unlike when we drafted the original economic strategic plan back in 2005. So that taking out an office building as opposed to, say, a more commercial building and replacing with housing, it doesn't bother me so much as perhaps some other types of work. I know it's not part, and I did talk to staff about this earlier today. I know that it's not part of this particular application to look about the whole North Camino Ramon specific plan. But I will say that I don't think that we should have blinders on and not look at how this project fits within the entire plan. I think the saving grace to a certain extent is that the plan actually calls for housing right next to this, cheek to jowl, on the Toyota property, so that it's compatible with that. It's right across the street from what's being built at City Walk. So from the standpoint of replacing the office buildings with housing, I think in the long run, that probably suits the community in an appropriate, positive way. I also think, although I'm sure Mr. England's not going to talk about this, that I think that there is some plan, and it may be not written down or so forth, but to consolidate the office space in Bishop Ranch, maybe around 2600 because of the AT&T building. I've been told that there's some thought to sort of taking a large place like when Gary worked there, making them smaller to accommodate current business trends. Now, we don't know what the business is going to look like 3 years from now when the pandemic hopefully is reduced to maybe flu-like stages. But I think that there is some indication across the country that to some extent business parks have to be repurposed to account for some type of residential. And I think this particular project, I think where it's located right next to 2600 probably fits that category. I, like Commissioner Alpert, would have preferred smaller, less expensive homes, maybe condos or flats. Again, we have a lot of $1 million homes in San Ramon. What we don't have is $700,000 homes of any type. But I understand where they're coming from, and I'm not going to worry too much about that. In terms of the complementariness with City Walk, I think from what I've seen, it seems to be, but I think the jury's still out on that when we see the connectivity with City Walk. I'd like to see some more of that. The park, which is point 3, what the staff asked about. The park that you've planned is 2 acres. Down the street from me is a 4-acre park, which is twice the size that you're talking about. My initial inclination is that a 2-acre park in and of itself is not adequate for 1,600 people. The other problem I have is where the location is. It's on a corner of 2 busy streets, Executive Parkway and Camino Ramon, and it's away from all of the other buildings in your project. I think that Commissioner Marks had a very valid point about spreading some of the open areas throughout the project as meeting grounds and not try and create one general park in the area that's right across the street from the R2600. I really think that it would behoove you to take a look and see if that you could create more open space. I also think that Commissioner Alpert and Commissioner Marks had a point about maintaining the property because you have a 400-member homeowners association. Again, I'm not an expert on HOAs, but as Commissioner Marks pointed out, there is an inherent conflict between having an HOA pay for a park and it being accessible to the public. So if you were to take the park out and split it up, so to speak, within your development, then you would have a situation where the HOA would be responsible for it, and you really wouldn't have a problem with members of the public going there. I think from a political standpoint, that would probably be a better bet. With respect to the mix, which is point 4, I think that that's probably reasonable. As I said, I was at PAC when they did the inclusionary housing ordinance and talked about for sale houses. And the thinking was that for single family detached homes, trying to create affordable housing for that type of product was probably unrealistic. And so I think the way you've approached the inclusionary housing ordinance aspect of it is probably reasonable. I don't think that a 3,000 square foot 3-story home is really going to work with very low or low income people. Point 5 was the architectural styles provided. Now, everyone on the commission will tell you that I'm not an architectural expert, but I did go peek at the City Walk drawings. And it seemed to me that the type of architecture that Sunset had proposed for the City Walk project is compatible basically with what you're proposing for BR6. And by the way, I hope you can come up with a better, catchier name for your project than BR6. I'm not a big fan of that type of architecture, but it's modern, and I'm not one to stand in the way of progress. So I think it does sort of tend to go together with what City Walk proposes. The last point was, do we support the update of the inclusionary housing ordinance into the North Camino Ramon specific plan? I have to tell you, I sort of mixed feelings about that because I was on the General Plan Commission when we basically adopted a 25% affordable housing requirement for what became FARIA. And also when we did the same thing for North Camino Ramon specific plan. I think it is very difficult, at least in our particular area, to put in affordable housing. But, I have surveyed our neighboring areas, and what we've done in San Ramon is consistent with what our neighbors have done. And so I'm sort of reluctantly thinking that we ought to come back to the 21st century and adopt the inclusionary housing ordinance throughout the applicable specific plan areas. So in that sense, I'm agreeable to it, and just we'll wait and have to see how the arena numbers come out and what we can do on that. But for this specific project, I think it's a reasonable approach. So having given that polemic, does anybody have any other comments they want to make before we let the applicant and staff go home for the evening? I don't see any.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I do.
Okay.
We've all made some comments. It's sometimes the case that we don't know whether we all agree with all of the comments.
Mhm.
And that leaves not only the staff in a position of trying to figure out what to advise the applicant, and the applicant trying to figure out what we all agreed on, but it seems to me that we ought to go back over the key comments that were made and see, is there consensus on the part of the commission to direct the applicant that that's what we want to come back to us?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking to do. I mean, there was a number of.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's okay.
I'll give you an example. In the traffic analysis, I asked that there be a comparison between the 564,000 square foot office building fully occupied and the 404 unit project as proposed. Is that something other commissioners think ought to occur? And if it is, then I would expect we would see that in the final traffic report that comes out.
Well, I can only speak for myself at this point. I think for a couple of reasons, it's probably a logical way to approach, because that's the change in the plan from an office building to residential. And I think in terms of environmental impact, that's one of the things you would look at. Okay. So if you're looking for a vote, yeah, I think that's appropriate, unless Ms. Fear comes back and tells us we're way overboard on that. But
then I'm assuming the other commissioners agree with that.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
It's a baseline evaluation as to what is there currently and what the future conditions are going to change.
Right.
So we will need to determine that, to determine what trips are currently on the road and what new trips are going to be added on the road. So in order to basically generate the traffic impact fees also. So I believe that's something we do as a matter of course.
Right, that's my understanding. So.
And could it be in a simple table where you simply side by side compare the two? The other item that I asked, or that I said that I was interested in, was that there be a scaled plan of the city's walking district and the applicant's park and this project, so that we can see how they dovetail, if they do dovetail.
Okay. I think Commissioner Alpert, addressed that in his comments as agreeing with you. I would agree with you too. I think I meant something along those lines to see how the proposed project fit together with the city walk. I think Commissioner Kusnik did as well. And I think Commissioner Frank was nodding his head up and down. So I think he agreed with that too.
Okay, and my assumption based on the comments that I heard was that we all agree that there needs to be more green space, park area, whatever you want to call it, throughout the project, rather than putting everything in the 2-acre park.
I think the consensus was that the applicant would be well advised to at least take a look at providing more green space within the project boundaries, whether or not that required an elimination of the park or not, but that the key was to put some additional meeting spaces within the project. I think that's what I heard them say they would agree to look at.
And through the chair, remember, we will be discussing the park requirements with the Parks Commission also. And so we'll be getting their feedback as a recommendation to this body.
Right. Of course, Parks and Rec always loves to hear from the Planning Commission.
Well, they love us.
And vice versa. Okay. So Commissioner Marks, so we covered the points that you wanted to.
Those were the concerns or questions that I had, but so I'll defer to you and the rest of the commission if you want to continue the discussion.
Okay. I'm open to other comments, although I think that we all addressed the comments in a similar fashion. I don't think there's any outliers in terms of the comments that were made. So unless staff has a specific point or two they need some reinforcement on, I think we've covered everything. Okay.
Commissioner or Chair Wallace,
Yes.
just to confirm, was there anything that we didn't talk about? I know you went through all 6 of the questions that the staff report had, just to make sure there were no outlying comments that we needed to make, or, you know, if Cindy and Lauren and Debbie got enough out of us based on our largely rambling comments. But if there were anything that we should go back through the questions just to make sure there's nothing, of course, only you were logical enough to, you know, cogently answer the questions. But if there's anything we need to go back through there just to make sure that we don't at least touch on them if anybody had things to talk about.
It appeared to me that every single one of these items had been covered in the comments by the commissioners. They just didn't put a subheading and said, let me talk about X right now. They're all covered. With the one possible exception, I was kind of disappointed I didn't have more feedback on the architectural significance of the buildings. I'm assuming we're going to get that later. So staff, you're satisfied with what we've given you?
Yes, I believe we are.
Okay, and I assume that the applicant has had a great time and they'll have something to move over when they close out of the meeting. So I want to
And I take no offense to the wanting to change the name from BR6.
Well, that's okay. All right, well then I think we finished with 4.1 tonight. Do we have study sessions that we want to cover before we adjourn for the evening? Anybody have any committee reports?
Through the chair, very quickly, Ms. Chavez, if you could explain the public, we have one speaker who'd like to speak tonight. Can you explain the public comment portion for tonight's meeting?
I believe we did that at the beginning. We opened and closed public comment, unless I'm mistaken.
No, we did.
Yeah, so on a special, Ms. Poon, correct me if I'm wrong, on a special meeting, public comment is held at the beginning of the meeting and not following discussion on the item. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. It is held at the beginning of the meeting, but and I would leave it, you can leave it to the discretion of the chair if you would like to admit, you know, some further comment in the public.
Okay, so yeah, we did have public comment. How many people we have?
There's 2 people who have raised their hands.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's reopen public comment. And we'll hear from those 2 people. Hopefully they'll be the 2. So I'm going to reopen public comment.
Okay. Lauren, would you mind getting a timer for me? I don't know if we have to do it for special meetings, but if we're allowing the 3 minutes, let's start with, we have Joyce Carr, and I will go ahead and allow you to speak, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, we can.
Okay, I just presumed that we spoke at the end as well. Anyway, I've been listening to the meeting, but one really quick thing, Commissioner Wallace, I cannot hear you well when you speak. So it's muffled. So I don't know. I just want to let you know that I may say something you already said and whatever. I'm looking at this project. I do understand. Oh, I'm a resident here in San Ramon. I do understand that we have the housing that we need to supply for the lower income people, et cetera. My concern, and it was brought up, was the traffic in that area. When you have all those cars and you have people coming to work, I'm a retired teacher. I know a lot of people drive their children to school. Some kids ride their bikes. There's going to be those peak times during the day where the traffic, I believe, is going to be really, really heavy. It might quiet down for a little bit, but it's going to go back up. But with this new plan for the 404 homes, plus we already have the city walk, which adds a lot of cars. I would like to also, and I think Commissioner Marks spoke about the traffic. I would really, really like to see what the traffic is going to look like. When we first started talking about this project, it sounded like it was going to be, a beautiful setting and the parks and peaceful and safe. And the more that you've talked tonight, the more I've just gotten the idea that there's just more and more traffic and kids on bikes and running, and it's confusion, very, very confusing, very busy, very hectic, and not a real peaceful place to live. So I too would love to see those traffic studies done. I want the kids safe. I want the residents safe. I want everybody safe. And I will be listening in on the next meeting, which I believe is the 25th of March. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce.
We have one more speaker, Ms. Chavez.
Yes, we do. We have Jim Blickenstaff.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi there.
Hi there. Just a quick thoughts come to mind with this project. It's definitely heading in the right direction. There's still some unanswered questions. And it's kind of a chronic issue that's become more and more serious. It has to do with parks. As density increases, and this project's an example of that, in Bishop Branch, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of more residents. And we don't want this necessarily to be an example for the way we're dealing with parks, because I see the need for about 8 acres of parks with the people coming from this project, and only physically addressing 2 of those 8 acres. So I'd like to see the city kind of tackle this problem head on with a report on parks and a path going forward to answer that question. As we get more dense with housing in Bishop Branch, how are we countering that with appropriate park acreage so that the quality of life remains the same, at least as far as parks go? I don't want to see this trend continuing where we are short of parks. That's a broader city issue that has to be addressed before we multiply the problem with other approvals. With the density of housing increase in Bishop Branch, we also have the need for shopping centers. That brings up the Marketplace Shopping Center, which is actually exacerbating the problem with more density and getting rid of shopping center. I think you need to look at Marketplace as a place to remain shopping and not densify that area like you might have more appropriate need in Bishop Branch. So I would just add that the thing that really needs to be solved tonight, beyond traffic, which could be very serious if you have a community park area next to a very busy street and kids play and stuff, that could be problematic. And it might be more prudent to put neighborhood serving parks in the neighborhood and do it in a way that somewhat complements our general plan requirements, so we're not seriously short of parks. So that's the 2 thoughts that came to mind this evening. And I hope we can address them earlier rather than later in the approval process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chavez, do you have any others?
No, that was our last public speaker, it looks like.
Okay, then I'm going to close amended public hearing. Staff, do we have a meeting set for the first Monday in April?
We are canceling that meeting. This was in lieu of that meeting.
Okay. That being the case, I have a question from Ms. Boone, and that is, technically on the agenda, we don't have a line item for commissioner liaison reports. Are we allowed to do that? I know everybody's biting at the chance to do that.
That should be part of this item. It kind of is all encompassing, so it should be. Okay. Staff liaison reports and any staff report or interest items.
Okay. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Hope the Brown Act doesn't have a problem. Do we have any commissioners with liaison reports? I see a no. I see a no. I see. Mr. Alpert.
So I attended the Architecture Review Board couple of weeks ago, and it was the expansion of the fire station on Al Costa Boulevard. They're making it bigger. So the ARB talked about exciting things like the color of the doors. It will be red. They will be red, you know, in case you were wondering. All fire stations have red doors for good reason. But generally, they like the architecture, and we won't see it. I think this is I don't believe we'll see it. It's gonna be just approved. And it'll be accommodating the expansion of the fire district's fire station in anticipation of growing population and, you know, the expansion of Bishop Ranch in the future. So that was essentially what they talked about.
Thank you. There are no other commissioner liaison reports. Mr. Barr, if we're not going next week, when is our next meeting and what items do you think it will cover?
Right now, we have April 20th on the calendar, and we're looking to bring back the Bridges Deck Edition and Event Center.
Okay. As far as you know, that's the only item on the agenda that night?
That should be the only one for that particular night, at least at this point. If something
Okay.
comes up, we'll add it in.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And so we will not meet next week on the first Monday in April. So we are adjourned.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.